Hi, welcome to Pennsylvania Newsmakers, and as always, thanks for watching. Well, there was very emotional testimony this week in the state Senate on medical marijuana. We're going to hear from a couple of the state's leading reporters who were covering that, plus get into a preview of Governor Corbett's new budget recommendation to the legislature that will be on February 4. And what would a program like this be if we didn't look at politics? The Democratic gubernatorial candidates are doing forums all over the state. Got a couple of reporters in here to chat about that, and we'll do that after these words.
This is Pennsylvania Newsmakers, a fast-paced, unrehearsed weekly discussion with and about the leaders who shape your world. And now, here's your host, Terry Madonna.
Well, welcome back. Look, Steve Esack from the Allentown Morning Call and Mary Wilson with Pennsylvania Public Radio are sitting across from me, and they both covered what, and you all were telling me, Mary, I'll start with you, very emotional testimony. I only caught snippets of it. Medical marijuana, it draws, by the way, in a poll I just released this past week at Franklin and Marshall, 81%. Most of the polls now show strong support for medical marijuana. What was that like? You all wrote about this.
Yeah, they actually scheduled the hearing in one of these kind of expandable rooms so they could have plenty of people in the audience, because there was a lot of interest in this hearing, not only from the political types, but also from advocates, from people who are from the various state chapters of the NORML, the National Advocacy Group for Legalization, parents of kids, people who just have medical needs that they think could be helped addressed with medical marijuana.
Yeah.
Right.
Now, what was the reaction by the legislators, by the senators? There's a bill introduced, right, with, go ahead, finish my thought, that has two bipartisan, go ahead.
Yeah, it is just Senator Dalen Leach, one of the General Assembly's most liberal members.
You can say that.
Yeah, but
he says it. We're not telling tales out of school.
He's been pushing that bill for many, many years to no avail. He's got, now he's got Senator Mike Fulmer, one of the General Assembly's most conservative members, backing him up. And Senator Fulmer was a lot tougher than Senator Dalen Leach during that hearing on the Pennsylvania Elks Association and that sort of thing, who were saying they didn't want medical marijuana because then it would lessen the stigma for this as being a dangerous drug. And Senator Fulmer was saying, if that's the case, then we need to ban like Oxycontin and all these other prescription drugs that are a lot more dangerous, a lot more deadly than cannabis, than this version of cannabis that is out there.
Yeah, good. Go ahead. Did you want to comment?
Just really quickly. I mean, it's true that the Pennsylvania State Elks Association did testify at this hearing. I don't think I've ever.
Elks? Or you say
Elks.
Yeah. So like the lodges,
right?
And they have a drug awareness committee.
Okay.
But I don't think that it is. I can't remember another time when the Elks Association has testified at a hearing I've been at. So it's not like, oh, the Elks Association, they're a big political mover and shaker. I think they wanted to acknowledge that there are some people that are really nervous about legalizing medical marijuana.
Good point. Now, I followed this pretty closely, not as closely as you do, because you all are right there in front and center. But what I've learned just from following it is the medical community is divided on it. Some doctors have given testimony or been on news programs where they said, yep, great, some of these other drugs don't work. There are certain diseases, epilepsy, we don't need to get into all of them, where I'm willing to do it. Other doctors, well, maybe not.
Well, yeah, there is, it seems the medical community is split. The Pennsylvania Nurses Association is for this. The Pennsylvania Medical Association is not. But when you break it down, the medical community, it seems to be more the neurologists, the folks that deal with the brain or deal with epilepsy, that sort of thing.
Tend to be more for it.
Yes, exactly. Then some other specialists, I should say. The Medical Association wants the FDA to do more testing and that sort of thing, but marijuana is scheduled as that.
Yeah, we're gonna. Maybe
drug.
We'll have you two back, and we'll do a program just on recreational marijuana. It only draws about mid-30% support in the state. There's a huge debate about all sorts of pros and cons to that. We can get into that. I'm going to ask you one final question, and then we'll take a break and we'll get to the budget. All right. Does this have any chance of passing? Governor says he'll veto it. Do I got that right? Governor, what's your sense?
Yeah, so I haven't gotten it confirmed from more conservative members of the legislature, but Dalen Leach, such the liberal that we talked about, says that, the votes are there to pass this. It's just Governor Corbett's fault that, it won't advance. I don't know that I haven't confirmed that with conservative members.
As you know, the Senate, we can say this, tends to be more moderate, and the House in our state more conservative. But when you get someone like Senator Fulmer, who's a conservative with good conservative credentials, you would agree there, right?
Oh, yeah.
I don't know. Well, we'll see.
Well, Terry,
all right, we're going to come back. We're going to go. I want to get into Governor Corbett's budget on Tuesday of this week. He's going to make his speech before the General Assembly, laying out his budget ideas. We'll talk with Steve and Mary about that after we pay some bills.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by the Pennsylvania Chamber of Business and Industry, the statewide voice of business, and by the Pennsylvania Business Council Education Foundation, educating citizens and business leaders about important public policy issues and civic affairs. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by BetterSaferRoads.com. To voice your support for safer highways and less traffic congestion, visit BetterSaferRoads.com. And by the Pennsylvania Manufacturers Association. Business in Pennsylvania is our business.
Hi, welcome back to the program. Well, we just finished the segment on medical marijuana and what's going on in the Pennsylvania legislature with Steve Esack and Mary Wilson, both reporters. Steve, I want to talk about the budget, but you had something interesting to say at the break about the medical marijuana. Go ahead.
I was just pointing out that one of the supporters of this bill is the wife of House Majority Leader Mike Terzai. She's a doctor. Leader. Yes. So maybe there's a lot more support in the House than maybe we realize.
There you go. Well, we'll see. You all follow that. We could talk about that. All right. We've gotten all these leaks. Maybe that's the wrong word to put it, because they've actually been on the record, so I don't know about leaks, for the governor and some of his staff talking more about the budget than I remember in the past. Give us what do we know now about what we think Governor Corbett is likely to recommend to the state legislature on Tuesday?
Well, Governor Corbett, there's no doubt, is going to have more money for education, a line item that was cut in previous years. You're looking at roughly $10 million more for pre-K, $20 million more, I'm told, for special ed, some more money for higher ed. I'm not sure what that is. A lot of that extra money, as long as some other programs, are going to come from, I believe, the curtailment of some pension costs, because pensions are eating up a large portion of the state budget.
And school district budget.
And school districts. Sure. So part of their plan is to pull back a little bit on the school district and the state portion of those payments to free up more money. Other governors use that.
All right. Now, wasn't there also, he made some comments about more additional funds for folks with disabilities?
Right, that was something he just announced earlier this week in Philadelphia. So that's going to be, I think it's around $20 million more for this intellectual disabilities fund. He'll probably talk about at some point, because it's been an issue for him in the past, trying to get people who are waiting for services off a waiting list. Yeah. That might be part of this plan. But what we're seeing is, we're seeing increases around the edges of this budget. We're seeing marginal increases in programs, proposed funding for programs. And we're seeing that previewed. We're seeing that leaked out to the press, in kind of methodical stages. And I don't think it's taking a pot shot to say it's a calculated move to kind of like get people talking about some of the positive sides of the budget.
Absolutely.
When on budget day, on the day of the budget address, you don't want people saying, "Oh, he's cutting this much," because
I got it.
You don't want that to lead all the anyway.
Yeah. Is there any? We hear an awful lot about a deficit. 1.2 to 1.4 billion estimated, by various groups. Any word about how that shortfall is going to be made up? We're going to have Keno and internet. Go ahead, finish.
Well, there was a Senate hearing yesterday on lottery expansion for Keno, which is like a kind of like a computerized numbers game, ball game that you see on television.
You have to help me. I know nothing about Keno.
Oh, well, yeah, it's just...
I got it.
Yeah, it's just a computerized Cash 5, for example, or something. But so they want to use that to try and generate more revenue. So that's one way to do it.
Go ahead.
And that would be to generate more revenue for the lottery, to generate more revenue for programs that benefit these
senior
seniors
citizens
programs
mostly.
But people will point out that sometimes that money can get shifted into the general fund. Sometimes general fund money can get shifted into the lottery fund. So there's that money's fungible. The other thing the legislature is looking at is legalizing online gaming. There's a study out on that right now, and there's just this big push to look for revenue. Lawmakers and the governor's staff say that when they get together and talk, they're talking about how do we increase revenue for this year, because there's very little left to cut.
And we reminded that that's just a recommendation of the legislature. Will be hearings and lots of negotiations. All right, I want to thank Steve and Mary for coming in. Well, the Democratic candidates for governor are out and running around the state. One of them has commercials up, and they're doing lots of forums. We've got two reporters who are in the field covering these events, Robert Vickers and Brad Bumstead, and you'll hear from them in a moment.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by Pennsylvania Credit Union Association. Pennsylvania Credit Unions, where people are worth more than money. To find a credit union that is right for you, check out ibelong.org. And by the Energy Association of Pennsylvania, Pennsylvania's energy information source. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by the Hospital and Health System Association of Pennsylvania, working towards a healthy Pennsylvania.
Hey, welcome back to the program. Well, as I indicated before, we're going to do a Democratic gubernatorial primary review. I got that all out with, there are 8 Democratic candidates running for governor. Brad Bumstead from the Pittsburgh Tribune Review got detained. But joining me, as previously indicated, is Robert Vickers with the Harrisburg Patriot News and PennLIVE. Robert, as always, welcome.
Thank you, Terry.
I'm going to start out by just going through this list of names. I don't think we're going to. All of them have been. They've been invited to the program. I think we've had 4 of the 8. We're trying to get to them. It's not always easy to do schedules for when the taping appears. I'm sure Robert is aware of trying to get them to do interviews with their schedules. Tom Wolf, Ed Pulowski, Katie McGinty, Rob McCord, Allison Schwartz, John Hanger, Joe Ellen Litz, and Max Myers. Do I got that? Did I get that all right? But I had to read it.
Absolutely.
Okay. All right. Let's start general first, and then we'll get to specifics.
Sure. 8
candidates, a big field. How would you describe that? I mean, it's so unusual for our politics, right?
Unwieldy, Terry.
Yeah, unwieldy.
It's hard just for people that are interested in the race to remember all of the candidates, let alone distinguish between them, because their politics are largely very, very similar. The differences between them are you're really splitting hairs, and you really got to dig deep into their bios and their platforms to really find any significant differences between any of them.
Well, that raises, well, first of all, let's talk a little bit about the campaign. You've got these 8 candidates. They're all primarily eastern candidates, let me put it that way. One of them lives about a mile west of the Susquehanna River. Mm-hmm. So they're all, in a sense, except for Ed Pulowski, the mayor of Allentown, right, they're all in that same sort of quadrant, if you will, of the state. Let's try to figure out what's going to matter here. Let's talk, first of all, about what they have been doing generally. The campaign has picked up steam with finish my thought there. Are they now much more engaged? Tours?
Sure. What you see right now is a flurry of, I'd really call them forums more than debates. 3 really in the last week or 10 days that I know of in Allentown, Harrisburg, and Pittsburgh. And it's really the candidates familiarizing the Democratic political machine with them. Right. The one in Pittsburgh recently at Carnegie Mellon University I found particularly interesting because the turnout there, I'm told it was standing room only, And you really got a sense that people in the western part of the state are very interested, the Democratic contingent are very interested in this race. And there is no candidate from the western part of the state. Right. So they may be the ones that actually determine who is the nominee.
And could it be that because they know less about them, because they're not, that they want to find out more about them? Absolutely.
And one of the tangential asides in this, when you think about the geography of the state and running candidates, potentially a nominee from a very narrow corner of the state, you have people in the lieutenant governor's race, the least sexy statewide election.
I couldn't begin to tell you who they are. Yeah. You probably know.
Well, you've got former Congressman Mark Kritz, a former chief of staff of Congressman Murtha, who's running in the race, and his whole campaign is predicated on him being able to deliver Western PA for the eventual nominee.
Good point. All right. Now, at this point, except with the exception of Katie McGinty, they're not on TV, right? So the Democratic, voters of the state, Democratic voters don't.
They don't know, but Katie McGinty's move to get onto television first was something of a surprise, because word in the Democratic circles was that Tom Wolf, the York County businessman and former state revenue secretary, was going to start his ad campaign sometime early in
and we know
the next
why,
month.
Right?
Because nobody knows him, but he's got $10 million to
his own money
acquaint
and 3
himself
more,
with
right? He raised.
Exactly.
Yeah, you can do a lot with $13 million, but go ahead.
Absolutely. So so really what she's done is she's preempt him to get her name out across the state first. Yeah. And there's an old line in politics about whatever you do, get your name out there first. Well, she's done that, and she certainly doesn't have the same resources that he does. But she did it at a time, I believe, during the State of the Union address, that people would have been watching the president and to try and get her name out in advance. We'll see if that holds, or if his ad campaign that starts next week, sometime early next month.
All right, so they're doing forums. We expect, one is up now on TV in this state. We expect that, and let's run to a break, and I want to ask you about the TV part of it. And, it seems to me in this state that none of them are known statewide, that unless they put some pretty big dollars on what's called electronic media, it could be radio, TV, whatever but they've got to do that, or else they're just not going to gain recognition. All right, I'm talking with Robert Vickers for the Harrisburg Patriot News and PennLIVE. He's covering the governor's campaign, I should say, for his paper and the website. So we'll be back in a moment.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by Highmark Blue Shield, changing the way health plans work for business with a variety of plan options for employers and more choices for employees. Information is available at highmark.com. Have a greater hand in your company's health. And by the Pennsylvania Healthcare Association, the future of long-term care.
We're talking about the Democratic gubernatorial primary with Robert Vickers from PennLIVE, Harrisburg Patriot News. And before we get off of the money thing, money's an issue. Some of the Democratic candidates need to ratchet it up in order to get this TV message out, radio and TV. Would you agree?
Absolutely. I mean, the two biggest names in the race, U.S. Congresswoman Allison Schwartz and State Treasurer Rob McCord, are expected to raise the most independently.
Right.
But the initial numbers indicate that no one has really stepped far out in that race. And Tom Wolf, who we mentioned before, raised a significant amount, particularly for someone who's self-funding. Rarely do they get funds like he has.
All right. Now, within the past week or so, we got the report on the fundraising activities of Governor Corbett. And some of us were a little surprised it was in the range of $7 million, that it wasn't 10 or 15. What's the reaction, or what can you tell us about that?
Well, the Corbett loyalists say this is completely normal. There's nothing unusual about it.
Okay.
But for an incumbent governor whose state party chairman has been boasting for more than a year that he's going to have upwards of $40 million to get reelected, this is a paltry sum this early in the campaign. I mean, you really have to do a significant amount of fundraising to get to that goal, particularly when a lot of the loyalists, as again in the campaign, have been saying the governor's been going full guns on fundraising and has been doing a great job. But those numbers
I have
haven't
an
shown.
operational theory here that given the governor's polling numbers, which all the polls show make him weaker than past incumbents, that he probably will use the upcoming primary, even though he has, a minor opponent, to get on air and to tout his administration, and that's going to cost money. I mean, so that means that fundraising, here's the question to you, fundraising is obviously going to be a big issue, a big element, and do you think he's going to just simply work very hard now and get those?
Absolutely, he's going to work hard. The question is whether or not the donor pool will be responsive. There are several factors involved in this. It's an off-year election, which favors Republicans typically in a state with 1.5 million more registered Democrats. But because he's had, through most of his term, a limited amount of legislative success on big-ticket issues, there's been some skepticism, and even some of his supporters have said that donations trailed off after the summer's budget, where he didn't get transportation. But subsequently in the fall, when he's gotten transportation, they expect an uptick.
The business community will rally around him. And it's still hard for me to believe he doesn't raise, somewhere in the $15 to $20 million category. Which, at any rate, before I let you go, how is this Democratic primary? What's going to decide this now? As you point out, they agree on 80, we can argue about it, 80 to 90% of the issues that matter to voters. Tell our viewers, what are the 3 or 4 things that Robert Vickers, you're writing about this, what are you looking for that might make a difference?
Well, when I talk to Democratic strategists around the state, particularly the ones that are not aligned, there's a lot of criticism of the frontrunner, Allison Schwartz, but they all say there's no candidate that they'd rather be than her right now. She's the front runner. She's got name recognition in Washington, certainly in national political circles. She's got all the things sort of working for her. There are certainly some negatives, and she needs to improve her stump speech.
Right.
But she's still in the driver's seat of the race. Rob McCord, I thought, interestingly, State Treasurer Rob McCord, interestingly, during his Harrisburg appearance at the forum, for the first time I'm aware of in the campaign, mentioned his wife, an African American, and that he would like to see her become the first African American First Lady. That's a new theme in the campaign, and it'll be interesting to see if he trots that out some more. Obviously, you've got John Hanger, the former Environmental Protection Secretary from Dauphin County, who's trumpeting legalizing marijuana. That's certainly on the vanguard of the National Democratic Progressive Movement. So you've got all of these candidates sort of distinguishing themselves in some way, but at their core, they're all sort of traditional Democrats.
We're about out of time. I mean, it seems to me, and I'll be neutral here, they've got to find a way to distinguish themselves one from the other, and it won't be so much on issues. It may be on what they can, how they can position themselves to govern and what attributes they bring. All right, Robert Vickers, thanks for coming. You'll come back. You can help us cover the campaign. We'll see you next week for another edition of Pennsylvania Newsmakers, and stay well.